We're in Houston, meeting up with a company called Petro Energy in the South Houston area. Would like to introduce them and get to know them a little bit more and get this podcast going. So, good morning, Dean.
Good morning, Jerry. I'm Dean Dendy, one of the principals here at Petro Energy in Houston. And with me here, I also have Bill Rath, he's territory manager in Oklahoma.
I'm Bill Rath. I've been with Petro Energy for 5 years, and I cover Oklahoma, Arkansas, parts of Texas, and Louisiana.
How did you get started in this business? How did things get going for you?
So I was born into this business. So it's a family business. Petro Energy was started by my father, Bob Dendy, and he was an entrepreneur. Literally, I would say I was born into the business. So I was born in Owensboro, Kentucky, which is the headquarters for Modern Welding Tank Company. And Modern Welding was my dad's first job out of college. So he went to the headquarters and then subsequently moved to Houston to have a large location plant here, and then became an entrepreneur and started his own business back in the 70s.
When he was in Kentucky, was he doing almost the same thing here then?
Not really. So Modern Welding builds tanks for industrial process equipment, refineries and chemical plants, and he was more on that end at that point. When he came to Houston, it being a huge petrochemical hub, he began to migrate more into that end and eventually saw an opportunity in the retail petroleum, the downstream portion of it. So gas stations, truck stops, and even fleet fueling where their equipment was used.
So if it's generational, then are your kids going to move into the business?
I don't think so. My daughter's graduating from high school in a couple of days, and she's interested in studying medicine. And my son, I don't know. He's getting ready to start high school, so it's maybe a little soon for him to know yet.
But your sister's involved in the business too.
That's correct. My sister Angela Dendy Parr is involved in the business. She does the support role as accounts payable, receivable, handles insurance, our benefits, and does support, sales support with literature and, that kind of thing for us. So she's integral to the business and been involved for many years.
Probably most of her whole life too.
She graduated from the University of Houston and went to work for Deloitte & Touche, actually, out of college. And but eventually, I think about 4 or 5 years after she'd been in the working world, corporate world, she came to Petro Energy, more flexibility. And we had a role that required a lot of trust, handling the company finances, being a family business, and she picked up that role. So she's been with us for about 25, 26 years.
Her kids are interested or not?
Don't know.
Okay, that's right. That's a fair question.
Yeah, don't know. Like I said, she's a little ahead of me in that although she's my younger sister, her children are older than my children. Yeah. So I was a late bloomer, and she's more mature than I am. So, but I did graduate from college and come straight to work at Petro Energy. So I graduated from Baylor University on a Saturday and went to work at Petro Energy that following Monday.
So what took you so long? I mean, that was a day in between. I mean,
yeah, I had to move. I had to move from Waco, Texas to Houston.
How far of a drive is that?
It's about 200 miles.
Oh.
So
that's why you got a day.
Three hours. In Texas, we tend to measure things by hours as opposed to miles.
Yes.
But it's generally about a 3-hour drive.
Okay. So, Bill, what brought you to this industry?
I was in lighting previously, and just kind of hit a point in that career with that company that I was with that didn't see a lot of opportunity for advancement. And a friend that I was working with knew that I was possibly looking, and Dean was up traveling the entire territory 5 years ago and probably wearing himself out, and said, I've got to get some help, at least for the Northern Territory. and reached out to somebody at PEI and said, yeah, I may know somebody. And that was my first experience with PEI, even before I started, not even knowing what it was. And it's based in my hometown. Driven by it 1,000 times, didn't know what it was. And Dean flew up and we met and seemed like it was a good fit. And I drank from the fire hydrant for about a month and got up to speed on the fueling side. I was pretty up to speed on the lighting side, and had a lot of manufacturers that came in and rode with me to get me up to speed, and allowed me to introduce myself to my customers and distributors and end users. And felt like within about 3 months, I felt like I was at a point where I could really start to run it comfortably, knowing that there's still some more knowledge that had to take place.
Yeah, so, it's changing all the time. So
it is always changing.
It's always changing.
And there's a lot of different personalities.
Yes.
And you can go from one part of the country to the other, as you all know, and it's a different speed. And so you just walk in try to get to know people the best that you can.
Right.
So that you go in and you don't hurt yourself by knowing how to accommodate them.
Right.
And so, Bill, for maybe those few that have wandered across this podcast that don't know what the PEI stands for, can you maybe explain that, since you're from the Tulsa area?
And you drove by it every day?
Yeah, it's about 2 miles from my high school. I stopped at the gas station right in front, the C-store right there before. And so that's Petroleum Equipment Institute. That's our national trade association that keeps us in charge. They help us with a lot of the trade type things that we work with, but they also go to Washington and do a lot of advocacy on our part, or our industry.
Yes, they do. Yes. So getting emails and letters from them all the time of what they're trying to do to help us,
right,
where they're trying to cut back, so to make things work. So, but so you like it being in the business?
I do. It's as we tell everybody that doesn't know anything about fueling. We drive up to the convenience store, you put your card in, and you don't think about it. The gas comes on. And when you realize how many pieces and how many people have to come together in order for it to work, it's a pretty niche business, but it's very vast.
Yes.
It's a little bit of a paradox.
Yeah. So, and the benefit for us is that they're growing still. Even though people are coming out with electric cars and wanting to do everything else, we're still seeing the growth in the industry that is phenomenal.
Right.
I mean, gas stations are going up on every corner. Rebuilds are happening all the time. So yeah, it's interesting. It's a great industry to be in. I love the industry. So
it's a very large, very small industry.
Yes.
So when you go to the national convention, like the National Association of Convenience Stores, NACS convention, and PEI, Petroleum Equipment Institute convention, it's huge. There are tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
But then you realize that you keep running into the same people, and most everyone knows everyone else. A lot of family businesses still.
Yes.
Although that's becoming more corporate, but
it is. But the relationships are still there.
It's very much a relationship-driven business. Yeah.
And that's the benefit about it, about what we do. I feel that once we get to know people and we get to understand who they are, and you can develop that relationship. That's the part I like. So what I'm finding with you guys is, as we've been meeting for the last few days, talking things over, going through things, it's about who you are, what you are. I'd rather have that than the big corporate world. So I like that structure better.
It's much more enjoyable.
Yes.
So we have a very large territory, only 7 product lines, which is not a lot for a manufacturer's rep agency. But we get to see a lot of the same people over and over again. And so it begins to feel more like I'm going to visit friends in Amarillo, or I'm going to visit friends in, Little Rock, or I'm going to see friends in El Paso, which is, almost 1,000 miles away from here. So it's the travel's exciting, but it feels like you're connecting between friends and one home to another, when we've been doing business for some of the same people for 25 years. So.
Well, Texas, whether people realize it or not, is a huge state. Mm-hmm. A lot of traveling. Some of the places, though, you have to fly into, though, don't you still?
Yes. So, for example, El Paso is in a different time zone. It's in the mountain time zone, and it is about a 12-hour drive from Houston, and about 9 of the hours are nothing but cactus and jackrabbits and occasional oil well or mountain in the distance. So yes, it's much more efficient to fly there.
Yes.
Or Albuquerque, for example, which is a very long ways from here. So.
Yeah, so because your areas are so big, so and with you, then up north, you're still able to drive to most of your locations.
I am, yes,
So-
and it still requires some logistics and some planning because even though it's just those states, it's a really long. I mean, there's some big mileage between west side and east side of my territory,
Yeah.
so I have to be careful about how I plan things and coordinate and make sure that
Yeah, well,
the
you also
principal's
take
going to
care.
be there.
You also represent up in the northern part of the state of Texas, so the Panhandle up there.
Correct.
So, because
That's 6 hours from my house.
Yeah, if everybody knows the state of Oklahoma is that it's got that little thin strip across the top of Texas. So
Right.
that's unique. How many changes have you guys seen in the development of the retail business in the last 20 years?
I'll let Bill take the question first, since he's only been in it for about 5 years, and he's seen quite a few changes in that amount of time, and I can go back a little farther.
Right. Yeah. Even when I came on, we all knew about the larger distributorships and their constant growth into different branches in different areas of the country. What I have seen more recently is I call them like a super regional distributor starting to move in. They're not national yet. They maybe have aspirations to do that, moving out farther and farther. So maybe their 2-day route trip for their parts, they can't reach those locations like they could 10 years ago. So they've just grown so much larger. The other change is in the last couple of years is equity firms moving in. And maybe the name on the door of the distributorship still says ABC Company, but there's a multi-million-dollar company in another state that's looking at that company as an investment vehicle. And they bought in because they see that there's an opportunity for profit, but the companies I'm thinking off the top of my head don't have any experience in retail fueling. They just purely see it as a business
opportunity.
industry that they want to get involved with. So
Yes.
it's almost like the distributorship is talking back and telling them, this is what we do.
Right.
Versus everybody knows what they're doing. We're just buying you because we don't want to start a new branch. We want to buy a branch.
Yeah.
And we want to
So-
make money. So that's what they're trying to do.
Those are the changes I've seen just in the last 5
Okay.
years.
Okay. Yeah, we see that too. It's globally changing, but geometrically, or whatever the word is it still shrinks down to just little locations, and they're changing, but they're not changing. So sometimes they're staying the same, is what you're saying, but because the locals are still staying involved, but they're being run by a corporation. So
Correct.
it does help for the fact that they have money behind them, but you still got to develop the relationship. So
Right.
yeah.
Ultimately, it ends up being about somebody that knows what they're doing, interfacing with somebody that's trying to run a location, whether it's a huge truck stop or a really small, even a fleet fueling, commercial fueling location. It goes back to that relationship with the technician or the installer and the customer. What's really changed the most, I think, in the last even 5 years, and going back as much as 10 or 15 years, is the amount of growth that's happened by acquisition. There have been a lot of mergers and acquisitions going on. So when I came full-time to the industry, to Petro Energy, was in 1990, we had about 250 individual petroleum equipment distributors, installers, service companies that we dealt with in this really a 4-state area. We weren't really covering New Mexico at that time. Today, I would say actively we have about 60 to 75. Some are a little more specialized. That's a lot of consolidation in 30 years.
Yeah.
A lot of the same people are still involved. If they haven't retired or like they like to say at my church, graduated to glory. Haven't passed away. Then and in a lot of cases it's generational too. Some of the people who's the first or the generation that was there when I came along, or even when my father started the business, have passed away, but they're second and third generation it kind of gets in your blood, this industry. It's hard to get out of it. So sorry, Bill.
Ride the horse as long as we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have to admit that that's true. Is that once it gets into your blood, the industry, petroleum or fueling, it's there. It becomes part of you. Either you like it or you don't. In my case, I love it, so I can't get enough of it. And meeting people, like people we've met today, so going on.
It might have something to do with the vapors from the petroleum or I don't know, something. I don't know, but
Yeah, I've known a few of the people that the vapor did help.
I'm sure.
And I'll say, to piggyback on what Dean was saying too, is you see some of the generational, but they don't want to go the corporate route. So we're starting to see another group of startups of some of these. We don't know how many will stick and stay.
Right.
But that always is an opportunity for us as representatives to go out and meet with the smaller people to really help them get started possibly and be there for them as they grow, because we have seen guys in the last 10 years that have gone out and hung their own shingle, and now they're running 20 trucks. And to be there along with them, that helps build that trust. But
Yes.
you cannot focus just on the multi-location distributorships, because
Right.
you want to be there for those guys because they may become the large guy at some point.
Whether they do or not, it's still the great ability to be able to help people too.
Absolutely.
And that's the benefit I find, is that because a lot of people don't understand the petroleum industry, and if they're coming into it, it's great. If they've already had a background in it and you can help them with a leg up, I think it's great. It's an opportunity. So,
So, speaking of that,
this
for
is
the
Adam.
people,
Adam's with me.
the people that don't know, what is a manufacturer's rep? Because not everybody's in the fueling industry. Not everybody, like Bill alluded to, the C-stores, you only get to see the top portion of it, and there's a lot that goes into it. I think you even used the term an iceberg. You only get to see the top. There's a lot that goes on underneath it. So what exactly is a manufacturer's rep, and what do they do?
That's a great question, which I have had to practice that quite a bit in social situations, yes, because people ask me, and that's where I begin the explanation of what we do, and they look at me like I'm speaking Chinese to them. Like, I don't know what a manufacturer's rep is. So it's a manufacturer's or a factory's representative, and we shorten it to manufacturer's rep. And we say also in the retail petroleum or the downstream petroleum industry, that's a mouthful. So as a manufacturer's representative, we're typically working with medium to small sized manufacturers. We have some huge corporations in our industry that have, many product lines from, the tanks all the way up to the top of the canopy where that they can supply. But there are also quite a few individual manufacturers that make a component of the thousands of components it takes to put together a fueling system that can't afford to or don't want to hire a direct salesperson for a territory, which is expensive. So as a multi-line manufacturer's representative agency, we can cover that territory more efficiently for a few manufacturers. And then, a pellet question to that we often get is, well, how do you make money? Do you
What do you do?
are you
Drive around all day?
Right. No,
talk
that's
to people,
We're professional drivers and professional travelers, essentially. But how do you make money? So because we don't stock anything, we're not reselling anything, which, that's the job of our customers, which we call distributors. Not everybody calls them distributors. That's what we call them, of equipment. So anything that's purchased from a manufacturer that we represent and gets sold to either a customer, an end user, or there's a lot of ways to go to market, we'll get a percentage commission on that.
In that area that you're in, that you represent.
Just in the area that we
Correct.
represent, yeah.
And so when you say lines, so you got to clarify that lines mean those are the products that you carry, that you represent.
Correct.
So people ask for a line card, they're looking for a card, so you're going to give them a display of all the ones that you do represent.
That's right. The product lines that we represent would be short for line. Yeah. So, and we've found, a similar conversation you had earlier today. Too many product lines ends up being a much less efficient. That seems logical, and obvious, but by experience, we've learned having too many product lines is just not efficient for the manufacturers that we represent, or for our customers to try to go in and say, here's 15 different product lines with a couple of hundred SKUs or products a piece.
Yeah.
You just can't cover that. So
Yeah, that's got to be a tough nut. So, and it makes it easier when you can go in and represent just a smaller group. So, okay, good. Where
So feeding off of that, what are some of these lines that you have on for your rep agency? And you just tell us a little bit about how long that you've been with the smaller line. I mean, I know with SSDI being the cream of the crop and the top coming, I'm kidding, of course, but let us know.
No, you're
not. Look at, tell us some of the relationships you've developed over the years. I mean, we're just getting to know you, so this will help our, listeners know a little bit more about you.
we're very excited about our new product line, SSDI, Space Saver Distribution Inc.
Thank you.
But we haven't made any money with them yet, so
but you have a signed contract.
We're almost
that's right.
Almost there, yeah.
Have a signed contract. So, I would say the one product line that we've represented the longest is a company called RDM Industrial Electronics. RDM, Rick, Doug, and Mike Long. Industrial Electronics, going on 20 years. So I think we're at about 18 years with them that we've represented them. We recently had a product line that got purchased by one of those large conglomerates we were talking about that I represented my whole career, 32 years, was purchased. So those are very long-term relationships. It's a little unusual. Manufacturers and sales directors like to make changes from time to time. So I would say the average is more like 7-8 years, for us.
But you're looking to represent them for a longer period of time, and you're looking for the relationship part of that too. Where
Absolutely.
sometimes they're not. They're just looking for the bottom line.
Oftentimes they are. When it's the original team that started the company, or maybe the next generation that believes in the company, and they're like, well, we realize that the relationships we have with our manufacturers reps and our distributors and our end user customers are important. Big corporations tend to be run by bean counters, accountants, and they want to see the numbers there. So sometimes they think changes are a way to affect that. We represent 6 other product lines. I mentioned RDM Electronics. One, and it's all parts of components of a fueling system to put together. They manufacture the hoses. It's ERPCO. We've represented ERPCO for about 8 years now. Another one that we've represented for quite a long time is Federal Process Corporation, FedPro. They're an industrial chemical manufacturer. We've had them now for about 12 years.
Huh?
Yeah.
So your relationships are long period so far, long time. So.
We hope so. If we're doing our job and increasing sales and getting more, touches with more distributors, then there shouldn't be a reason for someone to go look for other representation.
Right.
But,
So you're doing your job.
Now, when we walk through a convention like the PEI NACS, and I'm with Bill, and I was like, we've represented a lot of different product lines through the years, and I at one point I said we could probably fill up a convention hall with the number of manufacturers that we've represented. And I was like, actually, the trade show hall is full of other manufacturers, and a lot of them are under one banner, one corporate banner. So in general, we're losing product lines because they were purchased by a large corporation or investment firm. Occasionally there are personality conflicts, but more often than not, It's an acquisition.
Right, bottom line.
We have a couple of other product lines. Sorry, he was alluding to that.
Bill is pointing his fingers everywhere.
Yeah, feel free to speak up. Your
I am not directing.
finger pointing does not come on a recording, audio recording.
Oh,
So,
it could. These are sensitive enough. So.
That's true.
obviously, IMCO Wheat and Retail. That's one of our largest product lines now, and they've become a very major manufacturer. So, IMCO Wheat and Retail is a very old company. The IMCO Wheaton had all the components that it takes to make a fueling system at one point, and they broke that corporation up. IMCO Wheaton Retail are the tank hardware, manholes, spill containment, a lot of environmentally related equipment, shear valves, crash valves, and a lot of cast iron and steel type pieces.
Okay.
And two other manufacturers we represent, other ends of the spectrum, electronic equipment and lighting. So Sloan LED, they're an LED lighting manufacturer it's relatively new to our industry, but have been around for a long time. They're the industry standard for sign lighting and accent lighting with colored LEDs.
Oh, yes, they've been using those. I mean, you can look at the bands around canopy tops and stuff like that on gas stations and see those. Most of that is Sloan.
Yeah, you bet.
Yep.
The Target, logos and
Yes.
some of the other large corporations that have that, companies that have that signage on it. And then we represent a company called Fluid Management Technology, which manufactures a automated fueling system, or what generically in our industry is called a card lock system.
Yes.
And they're doing things a little differently, and we're excited about that. That's the most recent one, besides SSDI, that we've represented for about 2 years now.
Okay.
So
But
covers,
ours is the best, of course.
yeah.
Of course.
Well, we definitely had experience with the kind of equipment that SSDI manufacturers, and that'll be a great fit for us. So there's a pretty steep learning curve for that, industry and that niche of the industry.
Very technical.
Yes, we agree with that, but the technology is still technology. So once you've learned the systems, you just have to adapt to new technologies. And SSDI does do that. We want to make sure that people are understanding that is basic stuff. We've just shrunk it into a smaller package, so it fits in better places, cleans up back rooms, makes it work. So how do you see the Houston market changing?
Houston, as I told you when you arrived here, is the third largest city in the United States. Now,
Yes.
according to the Census Bureau, that may not be the case, but as we all know, politics does play into some of what the government does. So
Just driving the freeways during rush hour.
Houston metropolitan area has grown to about 7.5 million people. The city limits of the city of Houston are huge, 50 miles apart, north to south, east to west. So I believe the population of the city of Houston is about 3.5 million people. And we got about, 8,000 gas stations and truck stops here. Not sure why there's so many, but they're building them like they're going out of style, and apparently making good money on it. So
Yeah, they're building them. They're also remodeling them. They're bringing them back up to codes. They're doing all the requirements that they have to do to stay in compliance. But yes, so it is a growing market still. With people moving into Houston, though, it makes it even better as a market. And we're just not talking. I mean, we're talking Houston now, but there's so much other parts of the state that are growing.
Right.
Even up in Oklahoma, I know that for a fact that the input of people moving into Oklahoma is great.
Sure.
So compared to moving from the East Coast and moving from up north down into these Sunbelt states. So yeah,
absolutely,
We're
and it does make sense. I'm being a little facetious, but we're very much a driving culture in
Yes.
Texas, but especially in Houston, with it being so spread out and sprawling. You have to drive everywhere. I mean, it's common to spend several hours a day in the vehicle.
Yes.
So.
what are the trades or the businesses or the things that you've seen being added to convenience stores and things coming about that you've seen in history happening, and the new up and comings and all of that makes a convenience store better? Gas stations, QSRs, all the quick serve restaurants and all that. Do you see that happening here in this area or growing?
Very much so. And I think a lot of those trends even started here. So what a lot of people probably don't realize is that the convenience stores that have fueling on it, they don't make a lot of money on the fueling portion of it.
They don't realize that. No.
Yeah, and even though gasoline or diesel may be $4 or $5 a gallon, if they're making 2, 3 cents, 5 cents on a gallon,
They're lucky.
They're lucky.
Yes.
So they make a lot of their money inside the store. We used to always joke it was, well, they make it on Twinkies and beer and cigarettes, and that was true for a long time. But you looked at very small. The footprint of a convenience store was very small for a long time, so it was almost like a kiosk size. They've grown, exponentially since then in what they offer. But what they discovered, and what actually a Houstonian discovered, I don't know, about 15 or 20 years ago, is that if you could put a quick serve restaurant in a gas station or attached to a gas station, you could really draw a lot more people in and make a lot of money on that. So the first quick serve restaurant ever in or attached to a gas station was built here in Houston. There's a gentleman by the name of Showkat Denani that put a burger.
I am not going to try and say that name.
Yeah, it rolls off your tongue. But he's quite an entrepreneur, and he's built several hundred stores since then and sold off, a lot of them too. Was a Burger King that was attached to a major oil Shell or Exxon or one of those brands. And it worked really well for him. So he developed that, and then many others began to emulate that and realize there was a lot of money to be made there.
Burger King, I'm sorry, so that McDonald's and Chevron, they paired up.
You bet.
So, and that didn't start for, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thereabouts. So, but you're seeing them everywhere.
You do. And here regionally, Whataburger is a big brand. You see a lot of Whataburgers. It's the best hamburger, fast food hamburger in Texas for sure. They're hard to miss with their big orange and white logos. So they've begun to partner with some of the other convenience store and retailers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you'll see some attached to or right next to gas stations and
Sure, in the same parking lot.
truck stops. Yeah. Usually the buildings are attached.
Yeah.
In the case I'm talking about. You bet.
Yeah.
And then a lot of retailers, the really smart, large, well-organized retailers began to realize, nationwide, it's a pretty short list that a lot of people in our industry are familiar with. The Quick Trips, the Wawas, the Sheets, began to realize, in Buc-ee's in our region, we need our own quick serve brand. We need our own quick serve restaurant. So they developed, whatever their brands might be, and began making a lot of money doing that. One of the largest, maybe the largest convenience store chain that, are known nationwide and even worldwide is 7-Eleven.
Right.
7-Eleven's corporate office is in Texas. It's in Dallas. They were famous for their Slurpees. That's apparently where they made a lot of their money was on Slurpees. They had one of the corporate purchasing guys told us everything we do is about bringing people in so they'll buy Slurpees. We have gas, so they'll come inside and buy Slurpees. And I said, why is that? He said, because the profit on Slurpees is insane. And so we wanted them to buy Slurpees. But they didn't, apart from roller grill hot dogs, which we've all had before, just a way to survive. But I don't think anybody sits around at night dreaming of roller grill hot dogs.
No.
Especially the 7-Eleven or convenience store.
Yeah, who knows how long it's been there. That's kind of the running joke. They wanted a quick serve restaurant of their own when a regional chain called Stripes is based out of Corpus Christi. They began to talk to them. They had developed a quick serve restaurant called Laredo Taco Company, which is made in-house. They make their own tortillas. They make all their own meat and beans, and it's fantastic. Breakfast tacos.
So it's all handmade.
It's all handmade.
Right there on the spot.
And I would put a lot of their food up against many restaurants where you would go and sit down and order their fajitas and breakfast tacos and things.
We experienced breakfast tacos.
Yeah.
I didn't think they were that bad, really.
Yeah, no.
So they were pretty good.
They're very good. So 7-Eleven purchased about 500 Stripes locations across Texas and New Mexico to get that Laredo Taco brand and to expand, of course, their stations.
Yeah.
But they got that in the deal, and now they incorporate that into every new 7-Eleven location that's built. Presumably wherever it is,
So they can sell Slurpees.
So they can sell Slurpees to go with the, fantastic handmade tacos. And you can actually, until recently, you could get a whole plate lunch with a couple of tacos and beans and rice.
Oh,
for
really?
$5 or $6. Yeah.
Wow.
That's cheap.
Yeah. Of course, in 2022, it's probably gone up.
A few
$10,
dollars.
but,
Yeah.
you know, whatever a fast food lunch costs, but it's very good.
Yeah, the pandemic has helped a lot of stores and not helped a lot of stores. So. Are they looking at doing drive-thrus then, you think?
You know, I don't think I've ever seen one that was a drive-through. Normally, people they come into the store and they stand at the counter and they say, "I want to order this." And
Right.
that is counter service, but you can see it being
Yeah.
made right there in front of you. And then probably it's located next to the Slurpee machine,
Yeah.
or the fountain drink machine. So.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's great. Well, I really enjoyed my time down here. It was great getting to know everybody and to meet with you guys and to develop this podcast and go through and introduce you and to make sure that the world out there knows who you are, so that we can bring in these new customers that you have down here. Can you expand a little bit on some of the customers that you do have down here, how you call on them and what you do?
Right. So part of the way we go to market, we want to generate interest and demand for any of the manufacturers that we represent. We sell typically through distribution, petroleum equipment distribution, some electrical contractors and distributors, depending on what product line it might be.
Yes.
But they may have dozens or even hundreds, possibly, of manufacturers and product lines that they have access to. So we need to create some demand for that. So although our customers are, companies that a lot of people may not have heard of outside of our industry, their customers are places where we get fuel, truckers get fuel, the Love's truck stops, Quick Trip,
Yeah.
Buc-ee's locations, Shell franchise locations, and Kroger and H-E-B. So places that we all get fuel that people know of. So we call on them as well.
So you call on them, and so then you have that relationship built with them. And so you're traveling quite a bit to see these people drive, which we've talked about earlier because Texas being so big. But yeah, and so you have that relationship with them. So it's great to hear that. It's great to understand that. So I am just glad that we're going to be working together, and I look forward to our relationship and to everything else that we can do. Any comments?
No,
Mr.
I'm
Bonet?
good. I think Dean and Bill have said it all.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Like Jerry said, we're excited. Great to be in the state of Texas, and sure we'll be back in the near future. Here soon.
Yeah, there's a huge demand for what you guys are doing here in Texas and the surrounding states. The growth has been phenomenal in the last 5 or 10 years. We've seen no slowdown in construction of truck stops and gas stations
None.
and fleet
Yeah.
fueling.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of demand. There's been supply disruptions is a pretty popular term right now,
Yeah.
but there have been some serious supply disruptions in the field that you guys
Yes.
specialize in, and
Yeah.
there's a big need for it. So we're very excited about that and having a relationship with y'all for decades.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. If you enjoyed the show and want to be notified when new episodes get released, please subscribe to our show on your favorite listening app. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Click on the links in the show notes below. Also, your feedback would mean the world to us. Help our listeners in our trade find us by giving us 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcast or your favorite listening app. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.